AI or artificial intelligence. So when Pat Spencer asked me whether I could say something about AI and the Sunny platform, I first thought that there is so much news about AI almost every day that there isn't very much or very little I could contribute, especially since I'm not involved myself in the development of AI. And then I thought I might be able to give some useful perspective as I have used different forms of AI programs, such as problem solvers and machine learning programs. I may say something a little bit about that later. Throughout my scientific career.
And maybe I could make AI a little less mysterious. Is that better? Okay. Also, as said, I have a lifelong interest in how our brain works and what makes us self-aware and conscious. And it so happens that about 50 years ago, as an undergraduate student, I wrote a small program written on punch cards, no less. And it could convert the text into a string of words that was complete nonsense, but it sounded just like the language of the original text. So looking back, my little program had all the elements of today's popular AI programs, such as network data storage, training with text that was written by humans, and probabilistic regeneration of text. It was, of course, tiny and simple in all respects compared to today's generative AI programs. After that, my interest moved on from computer science to physics, and I think that was a good thing. So to prepare for this talk, just like everybody else today who needs to write a speech or a term paper, the first thing I did was asking ChatGPT, which is the most popular large language model program from OpenAI, whether AI can be ethical. I understand something similar was done for the poem today. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and is a so-called large language model. These programs have received a lot of attention recently, and they are probably what you think of when you hear the word artificial intelligence. But there are other forms of AI, as I will discuss later. Anyway, so here's the first paragraph, what ChatGPT produced. AI itself is not inherently ethical or unethical. AI systems are tools that are designed, developed, and used by humans, and the ethical implications of AI depend on how they are created, deployed, and managed. The ethical considerations surrounding AI are primarily related to the intentions, actions, and decisions of the people involved in their development and use. So I thought that wasn't much of a surprise. I thought it was pretty good, a little bit vanilla. But it also shows some serious problems with ChatGPT. The information all comes from the internet, but without any references, sources, and links. I would get those sources and references if I did a Google search for the same thing. The second paragraph that I got, and I'm not going to read that, was a list that was clearly just copied from a web page, again, without the link or reference. And the third paragraph was simply a reformulation of the first paragraph. This sort of reminded me of term papers. We have to fill a certain page number and you just repeat the same thing. So at this point, programs like ChatGPT are mostly a different representation of a Google or internet search that comes in the form of an English text and, importantly, does not give any sources. So this last item actually makes it a form of plagiarism. And there are, as I understand, there are some people that sue those companies for that reason. It turns out that might also be a canned response prepared by a low-paid human contractor, something that is not advertised much, but is critical to make these programs appear so human-like. So, as you probably all heard, recently AI has been in the press almost every day, and a narrative is being developed that is potentially very dangerous, that it can even lead to the extinction of humanity. This point was made by the CEOs of the major tech companies, and they advocated for regulations and also a pause of AI development. Although there is a clear need for much more regulations, especially about making fake images and audio and about the plagiarism that's possible with ChatGPT. I think we need to question any narrative that are pushed by powerful interest groups. The CEOs are probably advocating for a pause so that they can catch up with the competition. And the possibility of AI leading to human extinction is probably based on a confusion of intelligence and consciousness, as I will try to show later. So let me now look at what type of AI programs exist. So there are mainly two categories of highly sophisticated computer programs that today fall under the category of artificial intelligence. The first consists of extensive search routines for solutions of seemingly intractable problems, often through an evaluation of all possible answers, structures, and configurations, something that a human could never do. The same type of programs are also used for pattern and facial recognition. Applications range from new pharmaceuticals to winning strategies of chess, or more recently, the game Go, or finding the best diagnosis to a set of symptoms and test results. This type of AI has been enormously beneficial to the progress of science and the development of new medicines and medical treatments. Expert systems that are based on these programs are getting more and more powerful and are quickly surpassing human capabilities. They are and will be part of our lives. A second category of AI programs are, in a sense, a different way to present a Google search result, and that's what I've talked about before. These programs, such as the large language model ChatGPT, are part of generative artificial intelligence that can produce language or pictures that look like they could come from humans. These programs use large data sets and extensive learning sessions to produce human-like answers to queries. These learning sessions consist of using every possible text on the internet and also of thousands of minimally paid human workers that provide human-sounding answers and responses. To make the answers in proper language, each sentence is constructed by repeatedly adding the best-fitting word based on all the stored text from the internet. One could describe this as a glorified autocorrect algorithm that we love to hate when writing text messages. When producing a sentence in this way, ChatGPT doesn't produce anything new, but can produce a sentence that sounds plausible. There is an obvious problem with this. There's problems of copyright and plagiarism with this approach. This form of generative AI can be extended to pictures as well, with even more worrisome consequences. These programs store the data items in the form of networks. They then train these networks by strengthening and weakening the connections between the data items based on the connections found through scanning vast amounts of text and information on the internet. This data storage is called neural network, since it's similar to how neurons store information and the training of a neurons store information in our brain. And the training of a neural network is similar to how humans learn. So let's talk a little bit about human intelligence. So it might be useful at this point to talk about human intelligence and intelligent behavior. Often the discussion of intelligence is limited to cognitive intelligence. But even cognitive intelligence has many different aspects. Maybe the main components are knowledge, comprehension, and problem solving. But there are other forms of human intelligence as well, such as emotional intelligence and social intelligence. And of course, humans are not the only ones with intelligence. In fact, animals can be far more intelligent, especially in emotional and social intelligence. Just ask anyone with a dog. There is a growing understanding of the physiological basis of most forms of intelligence, particularly cognitive intelligence. For example, it's now reasonably well understood how information can be stored in a complex network of billions of neurons and hundreds of billions of connections between the neurons. As mentioned earlier, simulating such networks of neurons with a neural network in a computer is at the heart of generative AI programs like ChatGPT. Much more mysterious brain functions are consciousness, an awareness of self, and free will. Consciousness is not unique to humans, but very widespread in the living world. Importantly, consciousness and free will are not the same as intelligence. And there is very little understanding of how they could arise from the biological structures of our brain, as in contrast to intelligence. Without the physical model of consciousness, in my opinion, it is very unlikely that we could ever build machines or AI programs that become conscious. Let me turn now to how AI simulates the human intelligence. Of the three components of cognitive intelligence, knowledge and problem solving have been simulated in computers quite successfully, significantly exceeding human capabilities in some aspects. Maybe we would say in many aspects. Knowledge, for example, is implemented artificially through the vast amount of information on the internet, a form of AI that we are using daily with Google searches, and providing us with an unprecedented amount of knowledge at our fingertips. It is, of course, also full of misinformation and wrong information, which is causing a lot of damage to the social fabric in many communities. We desperately need a fact checker here, an editor of all this information. Fortunately, this is in fact provided by a large number of volunteers for the information that is published on the Wikipedia website. Just an advertisement here. Truth and facts cannot be established by an authority such as a government or by a majority of likes on Facebook or Twitter. It can only be done by a dedicated group of our peers, very similar to a jury. And that's what's happening for Wikipedia. So I think it's important to support the nonprofit Wikimedia organization that runs the Wikipedia webpage. I believe this is the only way to make the vast amount of internet data beneficial to humanity. Now, a second type of intelligence, the problem-solving component of human intelligence, has been implemented with great success in computer programs. And it is the main tool for searching for solution of the most difficult scientific problems or making an accurate medical diagnosis. It is probably the area where AI is far exceeding human capabilities and is benefiting humanity greatly. Now, there is this last component, comprehension or understanding something. This component has long been thought to be impossible to achieve with a machine. The belief was that a program can only execute predetermined actions and can use only input data that is provided to the program. Probably the biggest surprise of the recently developed AI programs is that there are signs of primitive comprehension of these programs, of programs reaching conclusions and making deductions that were not provided to the program. The most advanced and largest programs seem to use an internal representation of the world as the most effective way to store all the data that they are trained with. And that was done spontaneously, not being programmed in. For example, there are indications that these AI programs can have a notion what the meaning of red is, and not just a three-letter word. This is very similar to how we store information and develop meaning in our brain. How this is possible without being programmed to do so is not completely understood as part of active research at the moment. But it's probably due to the fact that the programs use neural networks for data storage, which is closely modeled after the workings of our brain. We can turn this around, and maybe we can learn from this what comprehension means for us. What it means to understand something is in fact very personal. For me, to understand something means to have enough experiences with something or have enough knowledge of something that I feel comfortable with the subject, and yes, have a model in my mind representing how it works. The fact that AI programs with enough input data and large enough neural networks can simulate the same thing, therefore shouldn't be completely surprising. It is just the next step in simulating intelligence in a machine. The consequences of a machine that can understand things, however, is not understood itself yet. But importantly, it doesn't include the ability for a machine to make a moral judgment. It doesn't include consciousness. So let me end with looking at the dangers of AI. Let me end with directly addressing the dangers of AI programs and the typical fears we have when being confronted with the notion of artificial intelligence. The immediate and pressing issue is that AI can make the dissemination of misinformation and lies much more effective. Generative AI can produce fake messages, fake photos and videos, and also fake audio. This has the potential to further empower groups that create divisions and sow hatred. There is no easy solution to this, especially here in the US, where lying is protected as freedom of speech, as long as it doesn't cause provable direct harm. So maybe a first step is that all the AI companies have to clearly identify anything from their AI programs as AI produced with an indelible watermark. Also, any original work used in AI products, both as input data and for the training of the neural networks, must be properly referenced, and any use has to have the author's permission, and the authors need to be properly compensated. None of this is happening at the moment. So regulations for these new AI programs are, as is typical, much delayed. So there is always this effort to catch up with the technological progress, which is certainly true in this case. The other form of expert systems, that's a form of problem-solving AI, have the potential to replace many white-collar and professional jobs. This is a continuation of machines replacing human labor, now coming for the knowledge workers. This can be very difficult, although I have maybe an optimistic view. That is, this will be just another example where new tools will increase productivity. So these should be used as tools, not to replace workers. Problem-solving AI programs are also widely used to automate many support functions. And these programs are getting ever more sophisticated. Autopilot systems have been used widely for a long time and is generally quite safe, and is a form of AI. However, at least one plane crash was caused by an autopilot that did not anticipate that an instrumentation can fail. So a program that provides support functions in an autonomous way can and often do have programming errors. They experience situations that are not anticipated and sometimes do things that were not intended. So this is probably the most likely potentially destructive scenario for AI programs, and actually has already happened many times, although at a scale that is not catastrophic. A recent example, this is the self-driving software for cars that is being developed. An autopilot program for a car is much more difficult than for a plane, and it has already led to quite a few fatal accidents. One could argue that the bugs in these systems can be fixed, and then these systems could be quite useful, especially for long-haul trucks. A more sinister version of this was portrayed in the movie Matrix, where machines programmed to efficiently produce energy came upon an optimal solution. Humans were enslaved to produce energy while dreaming to live in a virtual world. This science fiction movie tried to show where extreme automation could lead. And there is, of course, also the fear that a program or machine would start to act independently with a free will, either as a good or evil actor, or simply doesn't want to get turned off. The most famous of such a machine is HAL 9000 in 2001, A Space Odyssey. Computer didn't want to get turned off, so it started killing people. Here I want to stress again, however, that intelligence and free will or consciousness are completely different things. Machines or robots that are evil or ethical will only exist in movies, is my opinion. And finally, another and immediate damage that AI is causing is through the enormous energy consumption of the large data centers and the large number of specialized processors that are needed for the operation of ChatGPT from OpenAI, Bard from Google, and all the other generative AI language programs. This is a situation similar to the vast energy required to mine Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies. With global warming becoming an ever more severe problem, the last thing we should do is waste energy on these often unnecessary or even frivolous activities. So thank you for your attention.
At this point in our program, we have about 5 minutes for Q&A. If you have a question for Thomas, please pose it as a question. You're going to be able to stick around after. So once we break, there'll be time for you to sit and talk with Thomas. But if you have a direct question for him, either come on up or I'll bring over the mic to you. Rick, come on over.
Thank you, Thomas. It was very informative. Do you think, rather than ethics, whether ethics of AI is possible or not, rather would AI degrade the ethics of human civilization simply by the abuse of the power it will have?
Yes, I agree. I think the capabilities of AI can amplify the harmful activities in human society, definitely.
I'm interested in your concept of consciousness and how will we know if and when computers have it?
Okay, so for consciousness, consciousness presently there is no understanding on a physical level of consciousness. For example, the notion of free will, that we can actually act as an independent actor, right, is actually in contradiction to our physical laws at the moment. Physical laws are basically deterministic, right? They can be predicted of what will happen in the future. Whereas free will conflict with that because so I know, right? And I think that will be very interesting to sort that out, right? As one of the fundamental problems of humanity is to, or questions humanity to sort this out. But right now, I don't see a solution for that. And if there is no solution for that or understanding of that, I don't believe it can be implemented in a machine.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Very, very informative. I learned a lot. You mentioned briefly about AI and in relationship to facial technology, facial recognition technology. As I understand it, there is a form of that currently available only to police, where just by snapping a picture, you can find out everything about a person. And I was wondering, it's not available to private companies yet, although there's been a court battle about it. I was wondering if you can comment a little bit more about the dangers of that.
Yes, it's clearly dangerous. I cannot, it falls into the same category as other dangerous uses of AI, right? Like making fake pictures. It all depends on how it's used, of course. And as if history is anything to learn from, it usually is used in the worst possible way, right? So I think it's very important that we start regulating our activities related to AI. In fact, it's probably already late to do that, but I think that's really the only thing we have is to have come to a consensus worldwide on how we should use AI.
Elke, if you unmute,
Yes,
Thomas is right here.
yes. I recently listened to a program on AI on NPR, and one of the teachers that was interviewed said that AI means the end of the English language. My question to you is, how do you distinguish if a student writes an essay that is authentic or one that is written with the help of AI? Thank you.
Right. Yes, I think you can't. Eventually, you will not be able to distinguish that. I think presently, there is still, some people think they can distinguish. I don't think this will last very long. And that's why I thought one way to get around that is by having the AI programs themselves require them to imprint some kind of information that it was AI produced. It should be done in an encrypted or indelible way, of course. And I think that could be done because the AI programs, these are all big programs that want to operate in countries like the US, right? And so we have some control over them to force them to do that.
Building on Elka's question, I'm a college educator and I assigned a paper for the students to write. A student checked chat, took some information, and at the end of the information the chat sent to her was a list of references. She went to those references and found that they did not exist. So a heavy-duty reliance on AI, especially in an educational forum, is questionable. Does anyone monitor the content?
As far as I know, no, nobody. There is no regulations. It's really open season for these programs, and that has to end. That clearly has to end. I mean, that was the same thing with the writer strikes in Hollywood. Creators have to be given their due and compensation, and they have to be referenced. And regulations is the only way we can do that.